Hello and welcome. I'm Lori Hammel and I'll be your moderator tonight. So excited about this topic. Embracing uncertainty. First of all, you're all very brave for being here. Thank you for showing up tonight. Because this wild and wonderful career that we're on as freelance artists, whoa, right? I mean, we deal with uncertainty. So Melissa put together this amazing panel. I'm so very happy that you're all here with us tonight. Let's go ahead and please introduce yourselves and what you do.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Davis. Thanks for having me here. I'm a writer and researcher for mostly in areas of psychology of innovation and creativity, wonder, business, meaningful work. I also head up a consultancy where we help companies and individuals and creative people like yourself advance your work in the world.
Love it. Emiliya?
Hello, I'm Emiliya Zhivotovskaya. I'm the CEO and founder of the Flourishing Center, and I use the science of positive psychology and mind-body medicine to help people develop the skills for happiness, well-being, and resilience. And so we train people who go out in the world and share how we can use the knowledge of how our mind works, how our body works, how social dynamics work to better navigate this crazy thing called life and still feel like we can flourish despite all of the obstacles and the uncertainty.
Wonderful. David?
Hi, I'm David Dean Bottrell. I'm a SAG-AFTRA member. I think I joined around 1850. And I've always been very happy to be part of this union. I'm an actor, obviously, and also a writer and a teacher, and have worn a couple other hats along the way as well.
Could I just add?
Please.
And what I just gave you was the voice of certainty about having a business. Right? What we didn't tell you was all of the daily uncertainty and challenges of having a business and so.
Right, so you know what we're talking about here at SAG-AFTRA Foundation with lives that are beautiful and challenging and filled with uncertainty. And you know, one of the things I'm really hoping for tonight, and I'm just so grateful that Melissa brought this topic up tonight, is because just how great it would be to leave tonight with maybe some insights that you haven't had before about the very thing that you've been doing, the challenges that you've faced, but also ways to maybe come up with something different for the next time that a challenge comes up that maybe put you back a bit, you know, emotionally or just confidence-wise. And so in some ways to be able to talk about this tonight, what I'm hoping is that we can open up a little bit about ways to sort of cope with all of it. So I'd like to start out with asking our panelists, what is the bravest thing you've ever done?
I was going to offer a rock, paper, scissors game, actually, as to who goes first. So I think you should go, Jeff.
I went first the last time. So many things come to mind, and actually what all comes to mind is that it doesn't seem big or extraordinary in certain ways. I mean, one is, I guess, you know, I grew up a poet in a Texan's body before I found home in New York. And so I was at UT Austin, not surrounded by a lot of creative artistic people. I was majoring in business because everybody else was. And then I went left and into humanities, and then in poetics and philosophy. And so that was one thing. And I guess business-wise also just choosing a number of years ago actually to have a business and then leave behind something that was pretty familiar in the world of editing and name a business Tracking Wonder, which, you know, so I would say that in addition to having children.
Wonderful.
Oh, no, go ahead, please.
Okay. Well, I love, Jeffrey, how you reminded us all that what you all see as us describing or giving you our elevator speech is the backside of a lot of work, and we don't get to tell you all of the failures and all of the obstacles. And so often when people look at what I've created, they go, wow, Emiliya, you know, you're so amazing. And I have this little voice inside of my head that just wants to be like, this is just 11 years of hustle, of just a lot of work. And I kind of want to say, if you do anything for that long and the amount of hours that I put in, sometimes it's going to take shape. So when you ask what's the bravest thing I've done, I actually immediately can teleport myself back to this moment in time. It was probably about 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago. So one of the big programs that we run at the Flourishing Center is a certification program for practitioners in positive psychology. We had initially launched it through the New York Open Center, which you guys might be familiar with, this beautiful organization. And in business, they've got a really nice list. They've got an established name for themselves. And after a couple of years of running this program under this big umbrella, this little voice kept haunting me, which was like, it's time to take your show on the road. And I just kept quieting that voice. And I made the leap to actually, walk in shaking and sort of say, hey, I think this is the last time I'm running this program here. And I had this vision to offer it in different cities and all the work I was doing. And my people pleaser came out, I just wanted to just make everybody happy. And I had to keep listening to this voice that was saying, no, this is what you need to do. You have to take this leap of faith. So I had to trust that without this big list of students, that somehow I was going to be able to do it on my own. And if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be where I am today, because we then took it to 3 cities, 5 cities. At most, at our peak, we're at 12 cities across the U.S. and Canada. We've trained over 1,300 practitioners in 38 countries. And if I didn't take that initial leap to say, hey, I have to take my show on the road, it wouldn't be here. But it was hard, and it was, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to do this? People are gonna, wonder, like, why should they study with you? You need these people behind you. So on the one hand, that was like the biggest and bravest thing. But I think in the moment, because of so many years of just stepping out of my comfort zone, I knew I couldn't listen to that voice. It was like one of these, like, really, do I have to? Like, come on. But you just do it anyway. So I think that and that voice and I were very we're together. We're in it for the long haul, and that's a dance that I feel like I've danced a lot. But that's one particular moment in time.
Wonderful, thank you, David.
I think I don't know about all of you, but when I first started out and wanted to be an actor, I had a very specific idea of how I wanted that to look, and I had a very specific kind of career that I wanted. And I tended to be very stubborn and be very, very focused on it being a certain way and only pursuing a certain way of coming at it. And it was largely modeled on the careers of other actors. And the bravest thing that I ever taught myself to do was I taught myself to say yes to opportunities that were unexpected and were off my path. And then I also, in addition to saying yes to that, I started saying yes to my own ideas, my own kind of creative ideas. And as soon as that happened, wow, did things change. It was a huge change, but I was terrified that I didn't have the judgment to do that. As it turns out, we all have the judgment to do that.
Wonderful. And I'm sure that everyone here today has had a lot of moments of being very, very brave. I mean, just going from the waiting room into the room that you're auditioning in, that's a journey of those steps that not everybody takes. And those steps can feel very, very long. Or when you're going on stage for something that means a lot to you. Those moments that you actually overcome whatever is inside you that thinks, maybe I should just stay in my chair or leave. And you didn't. You just kept showing up. So what I'd love to do is framework a little bit tonight around some of the things that are recurring for actors over and over again, in ways that maybe we can look at it from a different perspective. So one of the things is preparing for an audition. We don't know who's going to be in the room. We don't know how it will go. We don't know if they're going to ask us to do it again, or if there's maybe even another part that they'll give us to audition with. So we're preparing, but we don't even know exactly what it's going to be. It's not like a test that, it's never the same. Every time it's different. So could we talk a little bit about, and then the other points I was thinking about are along the way of waiting for, to hear back about an audition, whether or not we got it. The idea of when a job ends, and the idea of being in between work. So those were some of the categories. If you think of other things that you'd like us to cover tonight, you have the forms that you can write out the question, and we'll try to get to as many as we possibly can. But I was thinking those are sort of guideposts. Those are things that we experience a lot in the journey of working and not working and looking for work. So if we could start first with this idea around preparing for an audition and all the uncertainty that goes with a job interview. Would anyone like to start?
Okay, I'll start. It's interesting because all three of the examples you give at the end of the day boil down to the same exact experience, which is how do you mind the gap? How do you mind the gap between stimulus and response? You mind the gap between they've called my name and I'm going to step into this door. You mind the gap between I walked out the door and now I'm in this waiting space, or I finished a gig and now I just am kind of free floating, trusting that another one will show up. And I also do quite a bit of coaching, and recently started to work with someone who's a freelancer as well. And so we talk about how it rains and it pours, it rains and pours and then it's dry, and it rains and pours and it dries. And during those off times, he would say, well, I could on the one hand say, well, I've got all this great time for all my other hobbies. He's in film. And so he knows at some point, if he looks at the past, there's absolutely no logical reason that he wouldn't continue to get more work. So why not just kick back and enjoy the free time and take a break and make some stuff that are his own hobbies. But he has a hard time doing that. Why? Because his stimulus response is filled with mind chatter that just spends that time worrying. Well, what if? I've had all this work before. However, I don't know what the future is going to bring. And that's what uncertainty is, right? We have a brain that has been wired for thousands and thousands of years for protection. So if it's got the option to sit back and just think about how wonderful things can be, or all the worst case scenarios, it's more wired to go to worst case scenarios because that's what enabled survival and protection. And that's the brain that we've inherited. So we look at how does he mind his mind chatter from the place of whether it is, okay, I'm about to go in. Am I worrying? Am I thinking about what I don't know? Am I worrying if I'm going to forget my lines? Or am I being really conscious and really present in how I show up there? Am I waiting for this new thing to happen and just talking back to this little voice saying, okay, I thank you so much, voice, for pointing out all the worst case scenarios that I will never get work ever again, and that the best of my career is behind me now. And, thank you for bringing all these things up. And if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all, is something that I think that we can all benefit from. So some of the work that I do in resilience, I give people the tagline, judge your judgments and doubt your doubts. So if your mind is filled with judgments of yourself, it's judging the situation. Most of the time, if the things that you say to yourself, somebody else were to say to you, you'd be offended or you'd be defensive and you'd say, that's not true. Oh, that was the worst. It was the worst thing you've ever done. You were terrible. That were just awful. If they said that to you, you'd be kind of defensive. You'd be like, well, no, it wasn't that bad. So we really need to learn how to control our thoughts, because our thoughts impact how we feel. They impact what we do. And in all of those scenarios, if you can get just a little bit of space and just say, I'm having this thought. I'm having this thought that something bad is going to happen. But just because I'm thinking that doesn't mean that it's true. And the more we can start catching our thoughts and redirecting it and use thoughts that are going to be helpful and help us show up in the world the way that we want to, rather than just letting this little inner critic get the worst of us.
So helpful. Thank you.
I'd love to follow up on that too. A neuroscientist once described to me like the size of a gerbil's brain, and how there's really next to no gap between that input and the output. It's like smell food, eat food, smell food, eat food, which is how I feel in New York City sometimes. Smell food, eat food, smell food, eat food. and it's often how we feel when we are about to audition and something goes wrong, and it's automatic instinctive fear quite often. And this is a normal part of our wiring. I wake up to radio station WRRY regularly at 4 a.m. in the morning. And so, which is often what happens when we get fatigued and tired, is quite often when this me center is really kicking into overdrive. So the neuroscientists also described how, of course, our brain is more evolved. We have this frontal cortex that can actually smell food and contemplate food and savor food and appreciate the beauty of food, and then wonder, how could I innovate, make food better, right? So in those moments of defensive uncertainty, which is really what it feels like, I can't imagine, frankly, what it feels like to prepare for an audition. Maybe I can, but it really must feel defensive at a certain time, like you're defending your identity, you're defending yourself against rejection and so forth. So I have been experimenting with different ways to trip that wiring. And one is to pay attention to what's outside of me, right? To just trigger and because all of that is internal looping, feeding itself. So, for instance, when I catch that loop, I will literally look outside of myself and pause and gaze at something and appreciate it and praise it. And I found myself doing that this afternoon even. I just, I have a little clips app that lets me take little short videos. And so sometimes just to get out of the constant thought loop, I will pull out this clip app and take a video of something for 10 seconds just to trip the wiring. The second thing is to maybe, it's not getting your mind off of the subject as much as it's just getting your attention out of your loop center. So have a conversation with somebody and just asking them questions about them. Ask them to describe a place that brings them great joy and listen to them. Because then again, you're not allowing yourself to obsess about what's about to happen. Instead, you just open up to somebody else and again sort of trip that wiring.
That's very helpful. Thank you. David?
This is a subject near and dear to my heart. I went through a period when I was a young actor and I just got out of school that every time I auditioned, I got it. I just did. I had this incredible run of luck when I was very young, and I thought that would last forever. And when it ceased to last forever, I was really thrown, and I didn't understand it, and I went through a period of feelings. I became fearful of auditions, and they became this huge trial that I was being put through. And it took a little time. I'm not saying this happened overnight. It was a process. But I eventually just came to a decision, because this is something I've been working on my whole life, is I don't really want to be unhappy about anything if I don't have to be. And I thought, auditions are a fact of life. I'm not an actor who gets many offers. I've had a couple in my life, but mostly I've had to audition for my work. It's not going away. It's a fact of life. And I thought, I have played a lot of roles that have asked a lot of me. I was on a TV show one time where I pretended like I was on a spaceship, and I believed it. And I thought, okay, I have the capacity to believe a great many things. And so I began to kind of rethink this. And this is a much longer topic. I teach a whole seminar on auditioning, actually. But I'm going to try to condense it down because I don't want to be a hog here tonight with the time. But it came down to this, which is I don't audition anymore. I give away free samples of my work. That's it. And if they don't want to buy it, fuck them. I will sell it somewhere else. I'm not going to hand over whether or not I'm a professional actor to somebody's opinion of 5 minutes of my time. I'm not going to do it. I would just refuse to do it. So when I go in to act. I don't go in to audition. I go in and I do a little acting in the room. And like I said, if they want some more, they'll have to pay me for it. But that one's free. That one's on the house, that first one. Thank you. Now, the other thing about preparation for, and I'm a human being, I get material sometimes, and I think, wow, I'd love to do this. I would love this to happen. I have expectations, I have wants, I have dreams. And what I've learned is when I'm going into that room, first of all, this is a gambling business. And there's nothing, it's a gambling business, and no part of my magical thinking is ever going to change that. But what I do is I put myself through a little 3-step process before I walk down that hallway. And the first one is I try to make sure that I'm physically relaxed. Because if my shoulders are in my earlobes, that's not good. I'm not going to do well. And the second thing that I do is I make sure that I'm alert, that I'm not so nervous that I have like tunnel vision, that I can actually sort of see the room and see who's there and respond when I need to. And the last thing, which has saved my ass, honestly, is I have taught myself to be curious about what is about to happen. Because I have no control over what's going to happen when that door opens. I have no idea who's going to be in there, if they're going to be nice or not nice, or how this is even going to go. So I go into it thinking, okay, I prepared for this. Now we're going to get on the roller coaster and see what happens. But to some extent, this is out of my control now. And I'm going to go in and do my work, the same work I've done in acting classes and on stage and in front of cameras for years. So I'm going to go in and do it. But I can't control how they're going to feel about it or if they're going to hire me. There's a lot of reasons I've been on that side of the table. I've sat through many auditions when I've been part of the casting team. And I've seen people give brilliant auditions and we couldn't cast them because of some technicality. Do you know what I mean? Some minor thing that kept them out of the running for this project. But nonetheless, they gave very impressive auditions. And they're people that I could look at and say, God, I'm dying to work with you as soon as I can. But not this time. And so I throw that out there because I kind of believe if I kind of give my whole heart to this and I go in and I'm like I said, I'm there to offer a free sample of what I can do, then I'm more likely to make the best. First of all, I'm more likely to do the best work I can do. And secondly, I'm more likely to, in that room, be perceived as somebody they might want to see again.
Yeah, I just want to add so much of what I love about what you said from a positive psychology perspective. One of my students once said, curiosity suffocates judgment. So if you just fill up the room with curiosity, like there's just no room for the judgment to happen. And we all hear this adage all the time, we should enjoy the journey and not the destination. And when you're an actor, in some ways, it's like, you do these things. Yeah, I should enjoy the freebies that I'm giving out and all these other things. But it's really hard because sometimes we get so caught up on, but I didn't get the role. I didn't get the opportunity. And in psychology, we know that one of the most critical factors for success, what separates those who succeed versus those who don't, has to do with their mindset. And the optimal mindset is what we would call a learner mindset or a curious growth mindset. And people who hold a fixed mindset, when they get triggered, they fall into judgment. They criticize themselves. They start to question, maybe I don't have what it takes. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Such and such, they're just naturally talented. I have to work hard to memorize my lines. What's wrong with me? Maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. So those who get stuck in judgment, they have more of a fixed mindset. They see things as either you have it or you don't. Ideally, we'd have this growth mindset, which is how can I learn? How can I grow? And so just going in with that curiosity, if we fill up the space to wonder, right? I wonder what it's going to be like in there. I wonder when I'll hear back from them. I wonder, right? Or just even how fascinating. I'm curious. We can train ourselves. Now, the knee-jerk reaction is still to want to contract when you are stressed, when you are threatened, but we can start to train ourselves into a more curious space. And when we do that, then we actually do enjoy the journey, and it's not just about the destination. Or what if the destination could be just as sweet as this whole process? And the more we can take control of our thoughts in the same way, the more mastery we have over the process.
Well, those are some great ideas and ways to look at the auditioning process in a different way. As far as, Jeffrey, you're talking about obsession, and I feel like sometimes in that space between you just did what you were supposed to do, you went to the audition and you're wondering, did I get it? Did I not get it? And then the worry thing starts to go. And the controlling that there is nothing to control except how we feel about ourselves. Is there anything else to add to that about things that you see that have been helpful for other people? Because in other businesses, you do your work, you present, and you hope that somebody is going to buy that. And we just happen to be selling our souls, right? Basically. So so it's a little personal. So if there's anything else you want to add about that?
Well, depersonalize it first and foremost. I love the work of, who wrote the book Eat, Pray, Love? Elizabeth Gilbert, thank you so much. Thank you for the help from the audience. She did a brilliant TED Talk around your elusive creative genius. And she talks about how creativity used to be you had a genius, you weren't a genius. And she talks about what does it mean to be an artist, to be a creative, and live in a world where we might have it as you are a genius. So that was so great, you're so wonderful, as opposed to your genius was your muse. It was something that your job was to show up and be the vehicle for. And if you happen to have writer's block or you're stuck, then you just kind of go like, muse, what the F? Like, I'm showing up, I'm doing my part, right? You need to do yours. And she would talk about how, therefore, also if your art got rejected, you weren't being rejected. Your muse is a little not having it right now, and you just have to keep going back at it. So first and foremost, we should probably not view it as selling your soul. Let's start there.
That's great. Yeah, actually, I'll follow up too on the idea of genius, because we do talk a lot about young genius with our clients and in our community, which comes from similar philosophy. In Greek, it's this idea that we're each born with a sort of force of character, the sort of acorn that's beyond DNA, beyond how we're raised. It is with us, like a muse, sort of guardian. And where does it show up? How do you recognize it once you've grown up? Well, I ask a lot of people in different fields to remember a time when they were 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And regardless of circumstances, for better or worse, probably you could remember a time when you were truly at your best, even if others didn't see you that way. You're truly at your best. You're most free. You're most alive, without regard for reward or recognition. And it's in those moments sometimes that you can look back and recognize your genius. And perhaps remember how that genius has brought you to this place in the first place, has brought you to somehow get into acting. You didn't just get into it, like it got you into it somehow, probably. So it's actually something I remind myself of every morning, are certain qualities I had when I was that age, to actually bring that young genius to work with me. It's just one of my morning practices. Every morning I remember certain 3 qualities. And so that might be helpful. I just remember, because particularly in your field, you do take it personally. You feel like you are getting sized up, and it's a part of you, but maybe it's not the core of you that's getting, quote, sized up. So if you can remember who you are at your core, maybe just by going back to that memory, and you bring those qualities with you to the audition, And then after the audition, just ask your genius, how's it doing? And it's probably not obsessing and worrying. It wants to go play, so.
At the risk of sounding delusional, I'm going to tell you I'm going to tell you the truth about what I do. And again, this was something I came to. It didn't happen overnight. But if I get a call and they say, okay, we want you to come and read for the blacklist tomorrow, this is what I say to myself. I say, I got a job on the blacklist tomorrow. And when I go to that audition, I work pretty hard on my auditions, and I go there to shoot my coverage. That's what I'm doing at that moment. And that's how I treat it. And I'm so brilliant that I can get it in one take. That's what I'm going for. And that's what I'm doing when I'm in there. I'm shooting, I'm giving them, I mean, quite honestly, if they hire me on Thursday, I'm not going to be any better on Monday. Do you know what I mean? I'm not going to be a more brilliant actor on Monday than I am in that audition. I'm not. That's the truth. So however good I am is however good I am in that audition. And so I'm playing that role. And for 5 or 10 minutes, that role is mine. It's mine, and I'm playing it. It's what I trained to do, and it's what I love to do. And these are not ideal circumstances under which to play this role in some casting director's office. It's not. But it's not impossible either. I've done some very good work in auditions, as I'm sure everybody in this room has. And so I say that because when I leave that audition, I pat myself on the back and say, awesome, you were on the blacklist today. What's next? Let's go find something else. Because that's done. I shot that job, it's done. Now, if by some miracle they call and they say they want to pay me, great, terrific, let's go do it. But in the meantime, there's nothing I can do. That's it. I did what I could do. I did the best I could do, truly the best I could do. I gave them the best of my work. The other thing is, when I go in and if I am late in the day and I see the sign-in list of the actors who've auditioned ahead of me, I sometimes see some pretty impressive guys, especially at my age, who've been around for a while, and they're really accomplished actors. And there was a time when that made me sad when I read that, because I felt like, oh my God, you know, he's auditioned, and why would they want me after they're seeing him? And I finally came to realize, you know what? How great for me that I'm on the list with them. How great that we're all on the same list. And how great that this casting director has faith in me, because they don't have to do me any favors. If they're calling me in, they believe I can do it. So I guess they're probably right. I probably can do it. I can do my version of it. And I'm going to bring my version in, and either they will buy that or they won't. But as we all know, certain death is to try to guess what they want and then create something based on a guess, as opposed to something that, you know, that comes out of our own idea bank, our own creativity, our own talent, which is what we all learned in acting class, was to be original, bring yourself to it. And then you get in the business and you start thinking, oh my God, I gotta book this, so I gotta like make it look like something. You know what I mean? I gotta make it look like that character description that you get. Maybe not. Maybe you need to make it look like your version of it. Stranger things have happened. Certainly in my career, I've gotten jobs by totally ignoring the character description and taking that material and making it my own, and they liked my version better than what they had in mind. I've had that happen. So I just want to say to you, if you have an audition, you're in the business, congratulations. Do you know what I mean? If you're on the list, if you're going to auditions, there's a million people who are not in your position. Life is good. If you're going out on auditions, that is a happy thing. Yes.
So I love this. Lots of tools, ways that we can think about things differently. A lot of empowering ideas of shifting it so that it's not, you know, do or die kind of things. Now, that other aspect of people being in between jobs, handling that. Because that is definitely a part, even if it's just for a day that you don't have a job. But, you know, I mean, this is part of the reality of a freelancer. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that aspect of it, dealing with the in-between. The delicious uncertainty of the in-between job time.
I'll jump on that. So again, I think it's still the same. I think it's the same thing, just over and over and over again, right? Minding the gap. And I love so much of what you offered around. You can hear the personal mastery that this man has over the many voices in his head, right? The ability to be like, I know my triggers. I've been down this path before. So here's what I say to myself instead, or these realizations, like this is going to be more helpful. So I think that if you could just practice that micro level skill in any of these scenarios, that's what it's about. And I think it's really important to remind yourself, why are you doing this in the first place? And what's your why for your life? So my goal in life is to be happy, is to feel like I'm flourishing. And I accomplish that in lots of different ways. So I'm not an actor. I do sometimes say that what I do is edutaining, because I educate and I like to be entertaining. Actually, my first career did start off as an entertainer. From the age of 14 to 26, I was a party entertainer. So I dressed up as a clown and a princess and dancer, and it was fantastic, but that was in a past life. But I actually had my first near acting experience a couple of months ago. I was casted. I was being casted for a TV show for a life coach, and the show was going to be about a coach doing coaching for women. And I had this was my first time ever doing something like this. And the woman calls me up, and she's from such and such casting company. And I swear, the minute that she told me about it, I was like, oh, this is mine. I got this. You're calling the right woman. Like, I so am perfect for you. I've been coaching for over a decade. I can so do this. I go through round 1, knocked it out of the park. Next day, I'm moving on to round 2. Awesome. Put all my stuff together. I had so much fun putting this like reel together. I didn't have a reel. I had to put all the stuff together. I was having a blast. And then it was like radio silence. Don't hear anything back. And then I just had so much empathy for my best friend. She's an actor here in New York City. And I was like, oh gosh, this is what you go through. I didn't get the role, and at the same time, and I was so confused because I was so certain it was mine. I was like, all right, what do you mean? But I reflected on just how much fun I had imagining that I did. And I thought about how much fun I had in my mind, and how much fun the audition actually was, and getting to talk about how I do impact women's lives as their coach and the kind of scenarios. And at the end of the day, like, it was yummy. It was yummy to live in my head. And I wasn't so delusional. Again, this might sound a little out there, but it's not like I was so daydreaming and so delusional that I wasn't able to function in my day-to-day life. But every once in a while, I was like, yeah, it's going to be amazing. And I get my hair done all the time, and I put all my makeup on. I wear really cute outfits, and I'm going to help, women achieve their dreams on TV. It's going to be great. And I think that'll still happen at some point, because man, I saw myself there. But it's like, recognizing that actually the experience, the joy that brought me, that's why I'm here. Even though it was in my head, I'm not grasping to it. I'm not like now going to be deeply depressed as a result of not having it. The key though is you do need a baseline level of stability and security in order to actually reap the yummy from those moments. We're not saying live in a delusional reality and then watch your bank account chip away, and then all of a sudden you're like, I don't know what I'm doing next month. So a lot of this needs to be met with a baseline level of stability and security in order for us to talk about the ability to just play with your mind, because otherwise your emotional brain is going to be in a deficit. Like when I hear you talking about the way in which you audition, you just screams abundance. It's yummy, it's juicy, it's learning, it's full, and that doesn't mean you need to have massive amounts of money in the bank. It's a psychological abundance that you have. So when we can have that baseline stability, then we could say like, wow, that was fun to dream about. Like I enjoyed that process, and it'll be this or something better, and this or something better. So much of it is how we play with it in our own mind.
Yes, I agree. And that is that buoyancy that you talk about, the resilience, and having the bottom line of our expenses, being met, not just a, dreamy, running down the street thinking about how happy we are. Even though that is fun to do, and have that experience. And wouldn't it even be better if you got a job doing that, being filmed doing that. So it's balancing that, and I think another thing that can happen around when you're in between work is I've heard some actors talk about, just like this idea that they're expecting that it's coming. So I'm in between jobs right now, as opposed to I'm never going to get another job. Like there is something coming, and so continuing to move toward that, because I think we've heard stories from people at all levels of accomplishment in the business thinking, this is, I just wrapped that, that's it. That's the last one, because you don't see something else on the horizon. And again, it doesn't mean that it's not there, but the expectation, that it will be.
I'm a big believer in making your own work, and I know that some people are a little intimidated by that idea, but sometimes you'd be surprised how simple that can be. It doesn't have to be something that's going to, catapult you into stardom, but it can keep you alive creatively, and it can remind you what you like about this, and it can keep your juices flowing a little bit. And I think it's terribly important to create something for yourself that you actually can be certain about in a very uncertain world. You can, at the bare minimum, you can invite friends over for a weekly playwright reading group. Do you mean? There's always something you can do. You can make with your cell phone, you can make a little YouTube video. There's always something that you can do to keep yourself kind of creatively active, because I have seen this happen before, and I've even experienced it where when I don't do that, when I'm not, because I'm kind of built to do this stuff, as all of you are. We're kind of built to be creative and to be making things and appearing in things and figuring things out and solving the puzzle. And when I don't do that, and then the phone rings and I have an audition, one of the first things that goes through my head is, gee, when was the last time I did any acting? And so my new answer is yesterday. That's my answer now. I'm always trying to find ways to keep myself engaged so that when the phone does ring, it doesn't feel like, oh, wow, this is the first, oasis in a huge desert, because that's not really, it doesn't have to be true. And I will also say that sometimes people take on these projects, whatever that might be, whether to produce a play or make a little short film or whatever you want to do, or stand-up comedy or music or whatever you want to do. But whatever it is, some people take those on with an intent behind it, that I'm going to do this, and that's going to get me this agent, and it's going to get me this thing, and it's going to get me the series. Or there's like a whole kind of a motive behind it that doesn't have a lot to do with the joy of doing it. Does that make sense? And I will tell you that I have produced some of those. I produced one of those that was really expensive one time, and it didn't do jack shit for me. And on the other hand, I was one day in my gym, and some guy walked up to me that I did not know from Adam. He had seen me and a couple of things, and pitched me this idea for a comedy review. And it was one of the funniest ideas I'd ever heard in my life. Just the elevator pitch was hilarious. And I said, I didn't even know him. And I said, you know what? I'm interested. And we wound up doing this thing. It was a huge hit in Los Angeles when I was living there. And it ran for like 4 years because it was packed. Every once every Wednesday night we did it. Like it was packed. It was like this underground hit. And I got so many auditions off that I cannot tell you, because it was done just for the hell of it, And I throw it out there that sometimes the joy with which we have for this inherently, naturally, gets a little, subverted by trying to find our way in the business all the time. And the business actually loves things that are good. Do you know what I mean? It loves things that are original and new and fun, and that there's a sense of freshness to. So kind of keep that in mind, because that exists in all of us. And like I said, if you're not somebody who likes to produce and you don't dig that, and that's very intimidating to you, maybe you should make friends with some people who are doing that, and you can support their work and be part of that. But I do think, especially in 2019, it's very important to feel like you're not just it's very important to not wait for permission to create. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that is a perfect segue, because I was reminded of what you said was one of the bravest things you did, which is started to take my own creative ideas seriously. And that is brave. And we were talking before about, quote, our times. we live in sort of a time of cultural vertigo, and it's been going on since before 2016. You know, there was 9/11, and then the recession of 2007, 2008, compounded with rampant changes in digital technology, which has changed every industry and field, especially but not exclusive to entertainment. And it's changed how you work. It's changed how you make work. So I think I read recently one study that the average US worker will have 12 to 15 very different jobs in a lifetime. Some of you are like, oh, I already did that, right? But like radical shifts in careers too. And you're like, yeah, I did that too. So creativity, for me, genuinely is a way of living. And creativity can be defined in psychology as the capacity to generate and execute useful and novel ideas. That's one definition. We do all have that capacity. And when you're in between jobs or in between relationships or in between anything, there's a state potentially of confusion. And so I like to talk about fertile confusion, like fertilizing it, as opposed to living in the fear of the confusion, to actually fertilize it with curiosity. And so it reminds me of a person that I've interviewed and talked with, Tracy Fullerton, and she, in the late 90s, had Spider Dance, which was this great company that offered interactive entertainment to MTV, the History Channel, and so forth. She won an Emmy for interactive television. And then the dot-com crash came and completely shifted her field, like just pretty much wiped out her business. And so her business crashed along with the dot-com crash, and her sense of identity crashed too. So this becomes illustrative, I think, for us, because how do we respond when we feel defeated, when something's happened to us? Can we see it potentially as an opportunity to pause? Because what she did is she left LA, went back to Massachusetts where she grew up. Her father used to take her and her siblings to Walden Woods for family vacation. So she goes, but what better place to go to, for me, to go back and pause and reflect. And as she's asking the hard questions like, who am I? Like, what value do I offer? And I was thinking I was going to get into video games, but what value are they offering to the culture? And as she's walking among the birds and birds, she's like starting to ask other questions like, what if I created a whole different kind of video game someday that would instill contemplation, reflection, meaning, instead of, the shoot 'em ups? And what if I could create a video game based on Walden? And I don't know if you've read any part of Walden, but it's not, yeah, David's like, what? An introvert's delight for a video game. So if she stayed with that question. So there are a couple of things here. One is to pause and recognize the opportunity and go to literally a physical place that's nurturing and stimulating to get you out of yourself, to get your creative mind combining different ideas, and then ask some possibility questions like, what if I could? Why not? Why couldn't I? And live with that question. Don't expect immediate answers. You have to fertilize the confusion, because it took her several years to live into that question. She went back to LA, got a position at the USC Innovation Lab, and it took like 5 years. She got people roped in, loving Walden, and then 5 years, they get a grant. That led to another grant. She gets cancer in the middle of the project. But something else is instructive to what she did. She brought other people in. Like you're saying, if you don't feel productive, hang out with other people who are and have that support. We often say in our community, do it together beats do it yourself. I grew up in a very much DIY mindset, and God, that's exhausting. So you just might consider that, like really take it as an opportunity if you're in between jobs or in between anything, to pause, reflect, go to a physical place that's nurturing, ask some real possibility questions, and literally let yourself indulge the delusion, indulge the fantasy, indulge the vision. That's where changes in our life happen.
Yeah.
Thank you. So beautiful.
Yeah, and I just want to add to the beauty of that. So I love the Steve Jobs quote that you can connect the dots backwards, but not forward, right? So that's like a total connect backwards, yeah, of course it makes so much sense, but forward, when you're just sitting there, you have no clue. It's like driving a car at night. You can only see the first 100 feet in front of you. And when you drive that 100 feet, you see the next 100 feet. You don't just stop driving the car because you're like, I don't see the road. You just have to somehow trust that there is a road there. And I don't think we can talk about uncertainty without talking about the role of trust or faith. And I know that I personally, my motto is, if I didn't have a strong sense of faith in life, I would be as an entrepreneur, I'd be in fetal ball, sucking my thumb, rocking myself to sleep most of the time, right? Because there's no certainty. And even 10 years in business, you think anytime I've thought, all right, I see a trend here in my business, the universe is like, yeah, haha, let's laugh at that, because it's just, it doesn't happen. And it's so important to have a trust or faith in something. So I trust in a universal force that I believe is conspiring for me, and that works for me. I don't know what will work for you, even if your trust is just you trust in yourself. One of the most impactful books I've ever read was Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And so, someone who wakes up to WRRY, which I think is brilliant, and I will probably borrow that from you, Jeffrey. I was raised by a chronic worrier. I inherited Holocaust survivor genes, which make me maybe a little bit more stress adverse. My brother died when I was 14, so my mother had the worst possible thing that could happen to a mother happen to her, and so the remaining kid got worried about for the rest of her life until she passed. So worry was a real big thing for me. And when I read Susan Jeffers' work, she helped me recognize that we don't fear the things that we think we fear. You actually don't fear not getting another gig. You fear that you wouldn't be able to handle it. We don't fear losing our health. We fear that we won't be able to handle it. We don't fear losing our job. We fear that something terrible would happen and we would just be like Humpty Dumpty and not able to put ourselves back together again. But when you recognize that every single thing that has ever happened to you, you've always handled. And the best thing you could ever hang your hat up on is, I've handled it before and I'll handle it again. So whether you trust in your own resourcefulness, you trust in nature, a higher power, a God, a deity, whatever it might be, if you don't have that psychological trust, it's like the foundation of psychological safety. And then you don't feel comfortable driving your car because you go, I don't see a road ahead of me. What if there is no road and I will drive over a cliff? But if you trust, no, I'm not going to drive over a cliff. Or the famous, I think it's Master Chugachempe says, yes, the truth is you're falling and there is no parachute and you are just free falling, but there's no ground to crash on. And so enjoy the ride, right? If you've ever gone, skydiving, it's right? Just enjoy it. But you can't enjoy the journey if you don't have a fundamental trust. And so trust in something, even if it's just your own resourcefulness, because you're incredible. You wouldn't be sitting here if you didn't handle everything that's ever come your way.
That feels good, doesn't it? Yeah. I remember starting college, there was a presentation about you pack your own chute. And this idea that reminds me of talking about the falling is that, we can prepare in some ways for the unexpected. In just whatever it is that keeps your parachute going, whether that means that's faith for you, or faith in something bigger than yourself, or faith in your own resourcefulness. But I think that in so many ways, you tie a knot and you hang on, and then maybe later on you remember that and you build on that. And I think that seems like another important aspect is to see your wins and to log them in some way, if it's emotionally or if it's actually on paper in some way, just to say, hey, I've gone through this before. We've gone through this before, as far as just having this uncertainty with everything in life, and with our business changing a lot. I mean, there's a lot that's happened, a lot that's really great as far as accessibility. And David, you were talking about that, being able to make your own projects with your iPhone. and then just a lot of shifts in the landscape of what was expected as far as the type of work that was available and how people got it. But so in continuing this idea of empowering yourself, of really being mindful, of finding a way to rest so that you're not on this hamster wheel over and over again, as far as making decisions, because that is also another big part of being a freelancer, is you're deciding, do I take this next job, or do I take the other one, or do I take time off, this kind of a thing. Can you talk a little bit about decision making and listening to your intuition around that?
Yeah, I'll start. Yeah, decision make. I'm glad you framed it with intuition, because it can go in so many different directions for particular individuals. And I agree with you that it really, you have to have some sort of stability, financially, emotionally, to help you make decisions. So, if you need the job, you need the job sometimes immediately. That's a reality. However, if you have the capacity, if you have a little freedom in choosing, I do come back to, with our clients, their young genius. And I come back to those qualities because intuition can be so hard for people to grasp. So I have them reconnect. Usually we identify 3 qualities of their young genius, and they really recognize that young genius, even if others didn't. And we connect with that genius and say, what would your genius do? Or better, how would this job allow parts of your genius to flourish? All right? So I'll leave it at that, but otherwise, yeah, decision-making gets pretty complex, but I'm glad you framed it with intuition, and I'll just leave it with that.
And I'd love to hear, with David, do you have specifics as far as job opportunities that come your way? Do you have something that you think about in terms of this is what I'm focused on right now in moving forward, or is there any kind of a template that you use within your decision-making?
Well, I mean, what I flashed on as soon as you said that was I remember auditioning for a TV show a few years ago, and I hated everything about it. Like, I hated the script, I hated the people, I hated everything. I hated my audition, I hated everything about it, and I was offered it. And my manager called me with like, "Hooray, you've been offered this job." And I remember it just felt like I had like a bad taste in my mouth immediately. And unfortunately for me, at that moment, what I allowed to happen is that thing that we sometimes get in our head is like, oh, any job's a good job. You don't want to turn down a job. Hey, insurance. Hey, residuals. All that stuff. And so I sort of said yes, and it was a miserable experience. It was a miserable, horrible experience that I regret to this day. And I was so unhappy when I was doing this job and hated everyone so much that on top of it being this horrible experience, I could not remember my fucking lines. And so I blew take after take, hence making what was a horrible day longer and longer and longer. So then they, of course, hated me, and who could blame them? And so I got out of there, and when I drove away from that job after that horrible, horrible day, I remember thinking, you did this to yourself because you knew from the get-go you didn't want this job, and you would get another job. You always get people. We get more jobs. Jobs come. They eventually come. You got to wait, but they come. But it was dumb of me to like surrender to the, oh, I'm lucky to have a job. I'm lucky if I get offered a job. You don't have to take every job. If you hate it, you don't have to do it. And we forget that sometimes. And it's kind of a valuable thing. And I'm going to actually kind of double back on something for a second. And I hate to start this sentence this way, but I just published a book. Sorry, but I did. I published a book. Random House is my publisher. It's available and wherever fine books are sold. But in this book, it is about being a middle-class actor. That's what it's about. It's not about being a star. It's about having a creative career. And it's about making a living as a creative artist. And it's also about being happy with that decision. And how to keep an eye on all of the things that you kind of have to keep an eye on in order to be happy and to make sure your bills are paid and to have a life. To have a life and be happy and not let it destroy you, but you live this life and you enjoy it and you do your work. And I will tell you, the more that I interviewed a bunch of actors, wonderful actors that are all quoted anonymously in the book, and it was a lot of it's my experience in it because I've had quite a bit of experience in it. And I want to tell you that the biggest theme that kept returning and returning was the absolute poison of comparison. And I know that thank you. Thank you, everyone. But I'm just here to say, if I can say anything about, like we've talked about, Bill Esper was my acting teacher, and God love him, he's no longer with us, he just passed away. But he used to say, and I was like 22 years old when I was in his classroom, he would say, there is no destination, there is only the journey. I had no idea what he meant by that at the time. I was far too young and inexperienced to understand what that meant. I had destinations to get to. And now, the longer I've been in it, the more I have understood the wisdom of that. And the wisdom of that my journey is completely different than yours, than yours, than yours, than yours. It's as unique as my thumbprint. And so, therefore, the decisions that I make really need to be about my instinct, about what I feel will be best for me, and for what's going to make me happy, and what's going to use my talent, and what I think I can flourish in, what I can do well in. And and God knows if somebody offered me, something amazing that with some amazing salary attached, I would have to consider that. I absolutely would. I couldn't just say, well, I'm going to pass on that for artistic reasons. I'm going to pass on that gigantic check for artistic reasons. I would have to think about my life and what other wonderful art I might be able to make with the money that I would make doing this piece of shit. So, do you know what I mean? It's a balancing act in that way. It's just a fact of life. So I guess I kind of got a little off topic, but I did want to say it is your journey, and your decisions are going to be based on your life experience and your circumstances and your values as a human being. And keep that in mind, because the only people who win in this life are the ones who die happy. Okay?
I want to add on to that. And first, I just have to say, I love how your body just like went on strike against you when you didn't listen to it, and it was like, well, let me show you who runs your brain. You're not going to remember your lines. I love that because there actually is, when we look at the science in decision making and we look at intuition, your body is an integral part of that. And we don't live in a culture that teaches us how to make decisions. The age-old art of discernment is not taught to us. And the research actually shows that the way that we treat decision making is actually a little backwards. So we think about making a decision, we usually think, okay, I have to figure this out in my brain. And so how would you make a decision? Well, you weigh your options and you look at the pluses and you look at the minuses, and you think that somehow you're supposed to figure it out in your mind. And research shows that the more complex the decision, the harder it is for our rational mind to actually wrap ourselves around it. There's a reason that phone numbers have 7 digits and zip codes have 5, and your social security, which probably took you a little bit longer to memorize, has, was it 9 digits, 8 digits, 9, 8? 9. Thank you. See, don't even remember, right? I can tell you mine now, but finally, but our cognitive mind, our rational mind is limited, and it actually can't be your go-to for complex decisions. If you're trying to make a decision, do I buy this type of toilet paper or this type of toilet paper, you can weigh, is it 2-ply, single-ply, recycled, not, what's the cost, right? There's a limited number of factors, but when it's, do I take this gig versus that one? Or even, what are my decisions around how I structure my time? People will look at me when I've got a really crazy, few weeks and go, Emiliya, you must be so stressed out. You have so much to accomplish. I actually thrive during those busy days because I don't have time to overthink the things that I do. It's actually those empty days. Those are decision filled as well. Like, how do I spend my day? Those are really hard to do because sometimes those can be my worst days. It's just like, I don't know where the day went. I don't even know what I did. It was easier when it was packed. So we have to actually learn to use our unconscious mind for what the research shows it's actually designed for. So one way of thinking about your conscious mind versus your unconscious is your unconscious is like an accountant. So most of us will take all of our taxes and our receipts and we do all the dirty work for our accountants, and then we just show up and we go here. And the accountant will take all that and number crunch it for you and spit back your tax returns, hopefully giving you something back at the end, hopefully. And so what research shows is our mind works the same way. So the best you can often do is put the data in. So if you don't have an answer yet, you still need more information. Put in as much of the information that you need. And then research shows turn your mind off. So sleep on it. Go for a walk. Go play. Do something. And what happens is oftentimes we just have a knowing. We just know the right answer. And it's usually a visceral knowing. It's something we know in our body. And then we somehow rationalize it in our brain. And this has been supported by research. And they looked at complex decisions like buying an apartment or a car. Things that the more factors there are to a decision, the more we have to rely on our unconscious. And we have to trust the wisdom of our knowing. And I think it's great sometimes when we have those F-ups where we're, okay, just you curse, I can curse. We have those fuck-ups. Like, why am I being ladylike?
Set the standard.
Yeah, thanks. I know. I was like, I usually don't have an issue with that. Why am I being modest? You guys are all friends. It just got me blushing. You know, because sometimes we need those moments where it was like, shit, I should have followed my intuition. How many people have had those moments where after the fact we're like, oh, I should have, like, those are amazing moments. You needed that moment to teach you, oh, that was my intuition talking to me. And then you need to follow those moments where you're like, I have no clue why I want to just pick up the phone and call this person. And wow, that was exactly why I was meant to follow them. Like, our intuition is a muscle that we need to train. And so every time you don't follow it and you get the feedback, that's awesome. And every time you do follow it and you get the feedback, we're just strengthening the neural pathways that teach us how to listen to our body. And we need to actually treat that as an art and a skill that we can actually train.
Yeah, wonderful.
They're just happy I cursed. The cheering is about the cursing, isn't it?
Thank you.
I get it.
Well, and you know, it's interesting, you know, David, with your story about having a very strong intuition, you know, really knowing that and feeling it. And like you said, Emiliya, to be able to learn from it so we can start recognizing this is what taking this type of job or taking this type of journey at this time, you know, may fulfill me, you know, maybe the money's not as much as I would like it to be, but it's going to be a fabulous experience. I'm going to work with some wonderful people, or I'm curious. I'm looking forward to the joy of expanding into a character like that type of thing. David?
I have a very close friend who is a pretty popular casting director. And when I told her that story, she said, "Why didn't you turn it down?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know." And she said, "Are you kidding?" She goes, "You're not going to believe this, but we love it when people turn things down because it's like high school. It's like they turned us down. Now we've got to find them another job. Do you know what I mean? It's like they don't want us. We want you more. It's crazy, but all of show business, you know, runs on strange adrenaline. But it reminded me, again, to hear it from the horse's mouth. She's a big deal casting director, and she was like, "Turn it down." We actually totally almost kind of like it when people turn things down. Isn't that weird? But it's the truth.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm just going to say it's a weird masochism, this whole industry. It really is.
But it brings so much joy to all of us. All right. So we have a few questions from the audience, and this is for everyone. This is from Kay. My art is my life, and my life is my art. It pays my bills and gives me joy. How can I separate those, so the art and the joy, when artistic life doesn't match with my dreams or financial goals? My art is my life, and my life is my art. It pays my bills and gives me joy. How can I separate those, art and joy, for when my artist life doesn't match with my dreams or financial goals?
I mean, my first question is like, why? Like, why do you even need to separate them? You know, this is life. Like, life has disappointments, and to feel your feels. And so it's like, you can't get lost in a love affair and say, I want to fall madly, deeply, rapturously in love, but yet never get hurt or disappointed and ever have you like not meet all of my needs and possibly disappoint me. So it kind of goes with it too, right? Your propensity to experience love has to be matched equally with your propensity to be disappointed. And so I think that if you were just to try to push the other away, maybe she's laughing wherever she is. I hope that you are. I hope I'm not being offensive when I say this, but it's like, but why? Like, why would you? And because if you numb from one, you numb from the other.
Yeah. I think there's something, when we do follow a sort of creative path, one thing that helps me in sort of assuming a quest mindset is kind of approaching every day as part of this quest, which is going to require risk, is I remind myself every day that every big idea begets a series of challenges. And that's just a fact. Every big idea begets a series of challenges. And so pursuing art, that's a big idea, and it's just going to beget a series of challenges. So that when my computer crashes or whatever, it's like, oh, here's another challenge. So I normalize the challenges. I normalize the disappointments. Just briefly, when we pursue acting or art or other creative endeavors, we often associate it with the popular mantra, find your passion. And so curiously enough, you mentioned growth mindset, and Carol Dweck, who's foremost in some of that research, also was part of another study recently where they looked at younger people who especially had this fixed idea that you have one passion and you're supposed to go out and find it, and that's going to bring you great joy and happiness. and those people who believed that there was this fixed passion you're to go out and find, one, correlated with having less curiosity in other fields and other areas, and two, correlated with less resilience when in fact they faced challenges because their expectations were the sort of perfect ideal of what it meant to find your passion. So whereas those who didn't necessarily think they had one passion to go out and find had more of a growth mindset, and they were more curious in other fields of interest, and they were more likely to be able to handle any challenge that came with a much greater repertoire of cognitive, emotional, spiritual tools.
Well, that is very, that's exciting because it includes everything that can come with it, with the taking a big risk, taking a challenge. Because I love what you said about normalizing it, because it's when usually it's those events where you're like, this isn't supposed to happen to me. This must mean something. I'm supposed to not follow this or something like that. But when you look at it in a bigger context as part of the journey, as opposed to this is the roadblock that I can't get over, it just seems like, okay, well, let's see what I can do with this challenge. Because I think another thing that happens is, when it rains, it pours, and then you have something that's happening, and then, another thing, and you have to learn this too, and you better run over there. Oh, how can I make this at the same time? My schedule doesn't work out. And it's like, all seems like it's happening at the same time. And then you're like, why? I had that week off. Why didn't I why didn't I take that trip I wanted to take? Or, finally update this thing, this business thing, because it's like having that belief and that continuum that, the things that I'm doing now are toward a bigger goal, and it all works together, whether or not I have setbacks, along the way. And so to me, it just feels like, this subject is so like nebulous. It's just so big, and yet it's so much a part of what we have the faith to live in as artists. So I really appreciate just like, these little pinpoints, these ideas, these tips that you're giving us, all three of you, for along the way about how to handle something that might come up later this week, or you're like, oh yes, I've done that, and it worked for me. Just encouraging everyone just to keep really moving forward. Was there something else you wanted to ask?
I just want to quickly add to that what I was thinking when you were reading that question is I have three different friends of mine that I can think of who are famous. They're famous. I've known them a long time, and they're famous people, and they all are kind of in the incoming call business, you know, and one of whom is, my God, has got so much money, and and the other two are not doing bad either, and I can tell you because I know them personally, and I'm not going to say their names or anything, but they're as lost as anybody in this room, and it's a reminder to me that there's a big difference between art and show business. And I have a lot of faith in art to make me happy. You know, I don't have a lot of faith in show business to make me happy, but I got a lot of faith in art to make me happy. And at the end of the day, it's a job, and a very complicated job. And I understand it's also a very personal job because we have to we're the clay out of which we make all this. But I do believe that somewhere along the line, you got to kind of like draw the line between that which is you personally and that which is you as a professional artist, meaning an artist that gets paid. And I can't really advise anybody how to do that. It's really personal, but it's important because it can also, you know, the drive to be employed and to go up and all that can kind of make you crazy. You know, if that hasn't happened to you, I'm sure you know somebody it's happened to. So protect yourself a little bit. But in the end, life is life and work is work.
Well, I have to say we're getting close to the time we have to close, and I have a couple more questions for the people that were asking them. Just come on up afterwards, and we'll see if we can get your question answered. Also, what I'd love to find out is how can we find you, and what's happening next for you or right now that you're excited about that you're creating. Jeff, you want to start?
Sure. You can find some of my work at trackingwonder.com. and psychologytoday.com. Just look up Tracking Wonder on that site as well. What's happening? I just signed a book deal.
Yeah.
Yay! It's called Tracking Wonder, and it's looking at kind of the surprising path to a creative life of effortless mastery. Looking at
Oh, beautiful.
Wonderful. Emiliya?
I'm so excited for you, Jeffrey. This is the first I heard. I'm excited. You can find me at theflourishingcenter.com, or you can email me, Emiliya@emiliya.com. I produce a bi-weekly podcast. We produce 2 a week. So the Flourishing Center podcast, talking about different skills based on science, coaching, and all sorts of good stuff there. And our next certification program in positive psychology launches here in New York City in October, and lots of good stuff. Also some little thin, tiny little books coming out in the near future on a positive psychology approach to imposter syndrome, worry, judgment. And we also have a whole series of self-study courses on resilience. If you haven't checked out, we did something for SAG a couple of years ago on resilience because the two topics go really well hand in hand. And so lots of good stuff on the Flourishing Center website to be a part of if you like these skills and you want more.
That's great.
Workingactor.com. I'm the working actor of the book. Sorry, workingactorthebook.com is where most of my stuff's at. So that's out there in the world. And then speaking of this kind of thing, I guess it was last year, some friends of mine said, "Hey, we're making this little web series. Do you want to be part of it?" And it sounded like fun. The script was really good, and it was a blast. I had so much fun doing it. I didn't really think about it too much, and it became kind of a hit, and it won 5 Emmys. And so we're doing a second season of it, starting in September. And what else is going on? And I just did this show at Dixon Place. I do storytelling shows, and I just did one that I've done before, but it's the first time I've done it in New York, called David Dean Bottrell Makes Love, a one-man show. And thank you. And I'm here all week. And happily, Random House just bought the rights to it for an audiobook, and it's going to be recorded next month and released on Valentine's Day of next year. So that's kind of cool. Yeah.
Congratulations. Yes. What is the name of your web series, David?
Oh, it's called After Forever is the name of the series.
Okay.
Kevin Spiritus is the star of it and one of the writers of it, and it's really lovely, and it's pretty much everybody in it is over 50. And right, exactly. That's kind of the reason I did it. Is I thought, wow, when was the last time somebody did something like that? And it's very funny and very moving as well. It's a very powerful story. So I'm anxious to see what's happening in the second season. But it was really fun to do. And again, I had no expectations of it, but other than the fact that I loved the people involved, and I knew I would have a good time, and I knew it was going to be well written, and it it turned into something. So it's kind of great.
Love that story of the intuition there, David.
And you, how can we find you?
Oh, well, you can find me. I'm here right now. You can talk to me afterwards. Love being here. Love these fine folks and all this great information we've gotten tonight. LoriHammel.com. That's where you can go to find out what's happening with me. Thank you all for being here tonight. It's just such a pleasure to have you. And thank you to the SAG Foundation.